The crunch of timber echoing through the whiteout is a sound that survivors never forget. It is the sound of
That
roofs
last
caving
pallet
in, of
is
homes
uneven.
snapping
I'll
like
move it
dry
now.
twigs under
Good.
50
Stack it
tons
with
of
the
relentless
others.
snow.
Will do.
The sound of everything you built collapsing in a single freezing night. January 8th, 1998.
Keep pushing forward.
11:47
worse.
p.m.
Stay
Brett
together. Watch
Morrison
for
stands
drifts.
in the blizzard watching his life's work
This
die.
section is critical.
He
We
is
need to get it
53
right.
years old.
Agreed. The materials
6
must
foot
hold up.
2,
What about the
220
timeline? We have
pounds
time.
of weathered muscle and bone. A combat engineer who survived Khe Sanh, who built bridges under fire in the jungles of Vietnam. A man who came to Pine Ridge, Montana in 1972 with nothing but a tool belt and a work ethic and built 70% of the roofs in this valley with his own scarred hands. 25 years, 200 structures, 0 failures, until tonight. The roof of his house folds inward like a crushed beer can. The ridgeline truss he personally installed, personally certified, personally swore, would outlast his grandchildren, shears completely off the top plates. The sound it makes is not a crack. It is a scream. Wood tearing itself apart under impossible weight beams, splintering into jagged shrapnel drywall, exploding into white powder that mixes with the driving snow. Brett does not cry. He does not curse. He simply stands there, wind howling at 95 miles per hour temperature, 30 degrees below zero with wind chill, and thinks one single thought. That woman was right. That goddamn engineer was right. He looks up the mountain through the chaos of the storm, through the swirling white hell, through the darkness where the entire valley has gone black. As the power grid snaps, there is one light still burning. A single warm yellow glow at the absolute peak of Screaming Ridge. The troll under her bridge. Lawson's Folly. Hartwell's Tomb. Whatever cruel name the town had given it, the structure is standing. While everything else crumbles, while roofs collapse like dominoes across the valley, while 200 people flee for their lives toward the high school gymnasium, that bizarre stone fortress on the mountain peak holds. Brett Morrison turns his face toward that light and begins to walk. 96 hours earlier. Eleanor Hartwell does not believe in warnings that go unheeded. She is 34 years old, senior structural engineer at Morrison and Associates, one of the most respected firms in Chicago. She has designed 17 commercial buildings, 12 residential complexes, and 1 museum that won an AIA award. Her calculations are precise. Her judgment is sound. Her reputation is sterling. None of it matters today. She stands in a conference room on the 42nd floor, looking at 5 men in expensive suits who do not want to hear what she has to say. Behind her, projected on a screen, is a structural analysis that took her 3 weeks to compile. Load calculations, stress simulations, failure probability matrices, all of it pointing to one inescapable conclusion. The H-beams cannot support the proposed mezzanine load. Mike Patterson, the developer, leans back in his chair. He is 60 overweight, tanned from too many golf vacations. He has built 200 warehouses across the Midwest. He does not appreciate being told he is wrong by a woman half his age. Eleanor, he says, and there is condescension in every syllable. We appreciate your thoroughness, but this is excessive. We've built warehouses using these exact specifications for 20 years. She does not move, does not blink, simply advances to the next slide. The issue is not the H-beams alone, Mr. Patterson. The issue is the mezzanine load exceeding 40% of the safety margin when you factor in the storage density you've specified. The beams will hold initially. They will fail under sustained asymmetric loading, probably within the first 6 months of operation. Another suit, the project manager waves his hand dismissively. Asymmetric loading is accounted for in the distributed load calculations. Not at this density. Eleanor's voice is flat, clinical. You're storing automotive parts, heavy steel components. The loading pattern will not be uniform. When workers stack heavier items on the north side, as they will, because that's where the loading dock is, you create a moment force that these beams cannot handle. The welds will fail first, then progressive collapse. Patterson stands up. The meeting is over in his mind. Eleanor, you have made your point. We'll note your concerns in the file, but we're not redesigning the entire structure because of theoretical worst-case scenarios. Sign off on the permits, or we'll find another engineer who will. This is the moment. This is the choice. Eleanor Hartwell could walk away. She could refuse to sign protect her license, preserve her conscience. But she has a mortgage. She has student loans. She has Daniel, her husband, the architect who depends on her income while he builds his practice. She signs the permit, but she attaches a 12-page dissent report. Every calculation, every warning, every prediction of failure, stamped, dated, filed. Mike Patterson does not read it. He files it away and proceeds with construction. 3 weeks later, the warehouse has its grand opening. Daniel Hartwell is on site that day. He is 36 tall and lean, with kind eyes and gentle hands. An architect who specializes in adaptive reuse, who sees beauty in old buildings that others want to tear down. He is there for the final walkthrough, checking window placements, verifying door swings, doing the detail work that makes a structure feel human. Eleanor is in her office 12 blocks away when it happens. The center mezzanine H-beam shears at the weld point. Not gradually, not with warning. It snaps like a gunshot, and the entire structure understands in that instant that it is dying. Domino effect. 6 more beams fail in 4 seconds. The mezzanine level pancakes onto the ground floor. 40 tons of steel and concrete and inventory falling through space, crushing everything below. 3 deaths. Daniel Hartwell, a foreman named Marcus Webb, a young electrician whose name Eleanor will never learn because she cannot bear to read the reports. Eleanor watches from her office window as ambulances scream toward the warehouse. She does not run to the site. She does not call anyone. She simply sits at her desk perfectly still and feels something inside her crystallize into a substance harder than the steel that just failed. She warned them. She did the math. They did not listen. Daniel paid the price. She closes her laptop, packs her belongings into a single cardboard box, walks out of Morrison and Associates, and never returns. Her voice over, emotionless and final, accompanies the visual of her driving away. I warned them. I did the math. They didn't listen. Daniel paid the price. I'm done warning people who don't want to hear it. The town of Pine Ridge sits in a valley shaped like cupped hands, surrounded by mountains that scrape the sky with jagged granite peaks. Population 2,300. 1 main street, 2 churches, 3 bars, a hardware store that has been run by the same family for 4 generations. The kind of place where everybody knows everybody, where your reputation is built over decades, where outsiders are viewed with the same suspicion as wolves circling the perimeter. Eleanor Hartwell arrives in a Ford F-150 with 185,000 miles on the odometer. The truck is older than most marriages in this valley, but it runs clean engine humming with the steady reliability of something maintained obsessively by someone who understands machines. She does not stop in town, does not introduce herself, drives straight through on Highway 89 and turns onto the narrow dirt road that switchbacks up Screaming Ridge. The cabin she bought sight unseen sits at the absolute peak, an A-frame structure from the 1960s, weathered cedar planks, and a rusted metal roof perched so close to the cliff edge that it seems one strong wind might send it tumbling into the valley below. The previous owner died 6 months ago. No heirs, no interest, $48,000 cash, and it belongs to Eleanor. She parks the truck and sits for a long moment, engine ticking as it cools, looking at the view. The valley spreads below like a topographical map. She can see the entire town from here, every roof, every structure, every building that she will watch fail in 2.5 years. Her first trip into town is purely transactional. She walks into Miller's Hardware and buys surveying equipment, a theodolite, a laser level, heavy-duty stakes, and fluorescent marking tape. The kind of gear that professional surveyors use, not weekend hobbyists. The owner, a man in his 60s with a beard like steel wool, watches her select items with the precision of someone who knows exactly what they need. Planning some construction, ma'am? Yes. Need any help with calculations or recommendations? No. She pays cash. Leaves. The bell above the door chimes her exit. The owner watches her truck disappear up the mountain road and says to his assistant, "City folk never last more than 1 winter." Eleanor does not care what they think. She has work to do. The cabin becomes a command center. She sets up a drafting table by the window with the valley view. A desktop computer, ancient but functional, connected to a phone line that took the telecommunications company 3 weeks to install. boxes of NOAA climate data archives that she ordered from the National Weather Service, meteorological records going back 120 years. She works 16-hour days, cross-referencing atmospheric pressure patterns, ocean temperature variances, Arctic vortex positioning, precipitation density measurements, historical accounts of extreme weather events in the Montana Rockies. The data tells a story that no one wants to hear. In 1912, a Pacific moisture plume collided with a stalled Arctic vortex directly over this valley. The result was a phenomenon that meteorologists call a convergence event. Warm, wet air from the Pacific meeting brutally cold air from the Arctic, creating snow that fell not as light powder, but as dense, heavy water, saturated slurry. Sierra cement, 82 pounds per square foot of crushing weight that accumulated faster than anyone could clear it. 78 people died that night. Eleanor finds the records in a historical archive, newspaper accounts, death certificates, structural failure reports written in the formal language of engineers who witnessed catastrophe. She reads every page, studies every photograph of collapsed buildings, crushed homes, families buried under their own roofs. Then she pulls up the current atmospheric data, barometric pressure patterns, ocean surface temperatures in the North Pacific, the position of the polar vortex, wind shear measurements at altitude. The numbers align with 1912 with 89% correlation. Statistical probability of convergence event within 36 months approaches certainty. She sits back in her chair and looks out at the valley below, at the houses with their ordinary roofs built to ordinary code. 40 pounds per square foot load rating. Standard for Montana. Perfectly adequate for normal winters. Completely inadequate for what is coming. Eleanor Hartwell makes a decision in that moment. A cold, calculated, rational decision. She cannot save a town that will not listen. She can save herself. She will build the strongest structure that physics allows. She will survive. She will prove the math. And when they ask her why she did not warn them, she will show them the reports from Chicago. The warnings ignored. The husband dead. She will say, "I told you once. You laughed. I won't make that mistake again." The helicopter arrives on a Tuesday morning. It is a Sikorsky S-64 Sky Crane, the kind used for logging operations in terrain too steep for trucks. The rotor wash flattens grass in a 100-foot radius. The noise is tremendous, a physical pressure that rattles windows in town 3 miles away. The pilot makes 8 trips. Each trip he carries one I-beam. 24 feet on, 400 pounds of structural steel dangling from a cable beneath the helicopter, like prey carried by a mechanical raptor. The entire town watches. People come out of their houses. They stand in the street, shading their eyes against the sun, watching this bizarre aerial delivery to the crazy widow's mountain cabin. At the diner, Brett Morrison sits with his crew. 12 men, all of them local, all of them builders who have worked with Brett for years. They drink coffee and watch the helicopter make its runs. "What the hell is she building?" one of them asks. Brett shrugs. "Antenna tower, maybe? Or some kind of art installation?" City folk do weird things. His foreman, a man named Rick, who served with Brett in Vietnam, shakes his head. "That's structural steel. H-beams. You don't use those for art." Brett considers this. He is curious despite himself. As a builder, as an engineer, he cannot help but wonder what design requires 8 I-beams delivered by helicopter to the top of a mountain. But he does not go up there, does not introduce himself. It is not his business what the widow from Chicago does with her property. Not yet. Eleanor spends the next 2 weeks setting those beams. She rents a portable generator, buys a professional-grade welding rig, teaches herself advanced welding techniques from library books and VHS instructional tapes. The work is brutal. Each beam must be positioned with millimeter precision. She uses the surveying equipment to establish exact angles, drills anchor points 15 feet into the granite bedrock using a rented core drilling machine that takes 3 days to complete the job, mixes epoxy resin that costs $800 per batch and sets harder than in the stone itself. The I-beams become the skeleton. 8 massive ribs curving up and over her cabin in a parabolic arch. A protective cage of steel that will bear the weight of the sky. But steel alone is not enough. Stone is what makes it indestructible. Every morning at 5 a.m., Eleanor drives her truck down the mountain to the Whitefish River. She wades into water so cold it makes her bones ache, water that runs fast and clear from snowmelt. And she selects stones, not just any stones, river stones, smoothed by 10,000 years of current, 40 to 60 pounds each. Dense granite and basalt rock that has been tested by nature and found worthy. She loads them into the truck bed by hand, 1,800 pounds per trip, 40 to 60 stones, 3 trips per day when weather allows. The truck groans under the weight. The suspension sags. But Eleanor maintains the vehicle meticulously, changes oil every 2,000 miles, replaces brake pads every 6 months. The F-150 becomes an extension of her will, reliable and uncomplaining. People see her on the road. They wave. She does not wave back. She does. She is focused on the work. At the hardware store, the owner comments to other customers about the crazy lady hauling stones up the mountain. What's she building, when they ask? God knows, something insane. But there is grudging respect in his tone, because whatever she is building, she is doing it herself. No contractors, no help. Just one woman moving 60,000 pounds of stone over 520 days. That kind of stubbornness commands a certain admiration, even if people think you're crazy. Brett Morrison starts paying attention when the rebar goes up. He drives past Eleanor's property one afternoon on his way to a job site and sees the framework taking shape. Steel I-beams forming a perfect parabolic curve. Rebar welded between them in a dense matrix, creating a dome-like skeleton that completely encases the small wooden cabin. He pulls over, sits in his truck, studies the structure with a professional eye. The welding is flawless. The curve is mathematically precise. The engineering is textbook perfect. Brett Morrison knows good work when he sees it, but he also knows that stone in Montana winter is asking for trouble. Freeze-thaw cycles will crack it apart. Moisture penetration will split it from the inside. It is a beautiful idea executed with impressive skill, but it is doomed to fail. At least that is what he tells himself. He drives away and does not think about it again until the confrontation at the lumberyard. Eleanor is buying Portland cement, 400 bags, 60 pounds each, 24,000 pounds of material that she will mix with industrial epoxy and high tensile additives to create mortar stronger than concrete. The lumberyard workers loaded onto pallets with a forklift. Eleanor supervises checking each bag for damage, rejecting any with tears or moisture exposure. Brett Morrison walks up as she is signing the invoice. Eleanor Hartwell. She turns, looks at him without expression. Brett Morrison. He extends a hand. She shakes it. Firm grip, calluses on calluses. The hand of someone who has moved 60,000 pounds of stone. I've been watching your project, Brett says. Direct, no small talk. Mind if I ask what you're building? Protective structure. Against what convergence event? Pacific moisture plume meets Arctic vortex, like 1912. Brett pauses, processes this. 1912 was 85 years ago. Freak occurrence. Atmospheric data says otherwise. 89% probability in the next 18 months. Brett respects data. He is an engineer, even if he learned his trade in the jungle rather than a classroom. But he also respects experience. And his experience says stone structures in Montana are a bad idea. Look, he says, keeping his tone professional, I respect the engineering work. That welding is quality. But stone, you're setting yourself up for failure. Stone's brittle. Freeze-thaw cycles will crack it apart in one winter. Not if properly sealed, and load is purely compressive. Compressive load from what snow my timber trusses flex. They breathe. Wood's been working in this climate for 100 years. Eleanor meets his eyes. Your trusses are rated for 40 pounds per square foot. Sierra cement hits 80. They'll snap. Now Brett is annoyed, not angry, but his professional pride is being challenged by someone who has been in this valley for 2 years, while he has been building here for 25. I was building bridges in Vietnam while you were in grade school. He says, firm but not hostile. I've built 200 roofs in 25 years, 0 failures. Your experience is in normal conditions, Mr. Morrison. This won't be normal. And your experience is in what, Chicago office buildings? This is Montana. Different rules. Eleanor's voice does not rise, does not sharpen, remains perfectly level. Physics doesn't change with geography. Brett knows this is true. He learned it carrying 60-pound packs through 100-degree jungle heat. He learned it calculating load-bearing capacities for bridges that had to support M48 tanks. Physics is physics, but he also learned that real-world experience often matters more than theoretical calculations. "You keep building your fortress," he says. "I'll stick with what works." Eleanor looks at him for a long moment. Then she says the words that will haunt Brett Morrison for the next 6 months. "When the convergence hits, your roofs will fail. Mine won't. We'll see whose methods work." Brett walks away thinking stubborn woman. Smart but stubborn. He does not know that in 18 months he will be standing in a blizzard watching his house collapse, and those words will be the only thing in his mind. The first person to believe Eleanor is 92 years old. Robert Sullivan. Everyone calls him Old Bob. He is Wyatt Sullivan's grandfather, a fixture in Pine Ridge for longer than most of the buildings have been standing. His face is a topographical map of wrinkles. His hands gnarled by arthritis, but his mind is sharp as the day he was born. He walks up to Eleanor's construction site one afternoon in late summer. She is mortaring stones into place, working methodically from bottom to top, each stone positioned to transfer maximum load into the parabolic curve. Bob stands there for 10 minutes just watching. Finally, he speaks. "I'll be damned, you know." Eleanor looks up surprised. She has not spoken to anyone in weeks. "Know what? 1912, you're building for 1912. She sets down her trowel, wipes mortar from her hands. "You remember it. 6 years old, watched our roof cave in, killed my sister Emma. She was 2. Eleanor is quiet for a moment. Then, "I'm sorry. Folks think I'm senile when I talk about it. Can't happen again, they say." "It can. It will." Bob steps closer, studies the stone arch with an engineer's eye even though he has never had formal training. Bob's voice is steady despite his 92 years. "But I remember it clear as yesterday. The purple squain, the silence before the storm, the weight of the snow. Nobody believed my grandfather when he warned them." "How do you know it's coming again?" Eleanor shows him inside the cabin, spreads the data across her drafting table. Atmospheric pressure patterns, ocean temperature variance charts, Arctic vortex tracking maps. Bob studies them for a long time. His finger traces the correlation lines between 1995 data and 1912 records. When this winter, December to February window. "You told them, oh, they don't want to hear it." Bob nods slowly. "Same as 1912. My grandfather warned the town. They laughed. Then 78 died." Eleanor looks at this old man, this witness to history that everyone dismisses as senile rambling. "I'm not trying to save the town anymore," she says quietly. "Just myself." Bob meets her eyes. Smart, can't save people who don't want saving. He becomes her only ally, brings her coffee during construction, tells her stories about 1912 that match her data exactly. The purple sky, the wildlife exodus, the eerie silence before the storm. Eleanor listens and works. Two people who know what is coming, preparing while the rest of the world sleeps. The petition has 180 signatures. Wyatt Sullivan and Brett Morrison present it to the town council. The charge is aesthetic violation, unpermitted industrial materials, property value damage. They want Eleanor to modify the stone shield or face $500 per day in fines, escalating to forced demolition if she refuses. Eleanor receives the summons at her cabin, reads it once, feels nothing. Of course they would do this. The town hall is packed, 300 people, standing room only. The air smells of damp wool and hostility. Mayor Andrew Higgins, 58 years old and looking older tonight, gavels the meeting to order with reluctance. He is not a man who enjoys conflict. He ran for mayor because someone had to, and he has spent 8 years trying to keep everyone happy and succeeding at making everyone equally annoyed. Brett Morrison presents the case. He stands at the podium broad-shouldered and confident, speaking with the authority of someone who has built most of the structures that people in this room call home. This structure, he says, and a photograph of Eleanor's stone shield appears on the projector screen, violates every principle of mountain architecture. It's an eyesore, it's dangerous, and it's crushing property values for everyone on Screaming Ridge. Wyatt Sullivan adds his testimony. My property value has dropped 15% since this monstrosity went up. I've had 2 potential buyers walk away because they don't want to live next to that thing. There is murmuring agreement from the crowd. Mayor Higgins looks uncomfortable. Miss Hartwell, you have the floor to respond. Eleanor stands, walks to the podium. She does not bring charts, does not bring visual aids, just speaks directly, her voice carrying the flat certainty of someone stating mathematical facts. In 1912, this valley experienced a convergence event. Pacific moisture plume met Arctic vortex. Result was 82 pounds per square foot of Sierra cement. 78 people died. She lets that number sit for a moment. Current building code requires 40 pounds per square foot load rating. Current atmospheric conditions are identical to 1912. Convergence window is the next 90 days. Reinforce your structures or they will fail. Brett stands. With respect, Miss Hartwell, we don't build like 1912 anymore. Modern trusses are engineered. I've built in this valley for 25 years. My roofs hold. Your roofs rely on rigid resistance. Rigid breaks under sustained load. And stone doesn't crack. You're building a medieval fortress in Montana. Stone in compression is effectively unbreakable. My structure uses parabolic geometry. Load transfers down ribs into bedrock. The heavier the snow, the stronger it becomes. Wyatt Sullivan stands. This is an eyesore. It's destroying our property values. Eleanor turns to face the crowd. In 90 days, you won't have property values to worry about. Half the room erupts in laughter, mocking, dismissive laughter that fills the space like poison gas. Then old Bob Sullivan stands. At 92, he is the oldest person in the valley. His voice when he speaks carries the weight of lived history. I was 6 years old in 1912. I watched my house collapse. My sister died in my arms. Miss Hartwell's right. It's coming again. Brett turns to him, sympathy in his eyes but conviction in his voice. Bob, I respect you, but that was 85 years ago. We build better now. Mayor Higgins gavels for order. The room quiets. Miss Hartwell, he says heavily, you have 90 days to modify the facade to match town aesthetics or face $500 daily fines. Eleanor gathers nothing. She brought nothing. She simply turns and walks toward the door. As she reaches it, she stops, turns back. The entire room is watching. In 90 days, she says, voice carrying to every corner, there won't be a town hall to collect fines from. The door closes behind her. Brett Morrison says to the crowd, she's brilliant, I'll give her that, but she's wrong about this. He believes it when he says it. Eleanor completes the stone shield in the first week of November. The final polymer coat is applied on a cold, clear day. She inspects every weld. Tests load distribution with sandbags stacked on the western slope. Everything holds. Everything is perfect. The structure is exactly what she designed it to be. An indestructible shell that will deflect windshed snow and protect the fragile wooden cabin beneath through sheer geometric efficiency. She stands back and looks at it. 2.5 years of work. Every stone placed by hand. Every calculation verified 3 times. Her entire savings. Her physical health. Her isolation from any human connection. All of it for this moment. The valley below continues its normal life. Brett Morrison builds an addition onto the elementary school, his signature timber truss system, spanning 60 feet. Wyatt Sullivan renovates his stables with a new barn roof. Christmas decorations go up on Main Street. Children ice skate on the frozen pond behind the community center. Life as usual. Old Bob watches the sky. He reports to Eleanor every few days. She gives him a logbook to record barometric pressure. He takes the job seriously, checking the gauge she loaned him 3 times daily, writing down numbers in shaky but legible handwriting. December 15th, pressure dropping, 30.15. December 20th, cloud formation changing, 29.85. December 28th, it's close now, 29.40. On December 28th, the sky turns a color that Bob recognizes from childhood nightmares. Purple-gray, bruised, sick. The barometric pressure plummets so fast that people in the valley complain of headaches and vertigo. Ears pop. Sinuses ache. Something fundamental in the atmosphere is changing. Wildlife vanishes. Deer that usually graze in the meadows are gone, fled into the deep caves on the north face of the mountain. Birds that should be wintering in the valley have disappeared. Even the ravens, those stubborn survivors who stay through anything, are nowhere to be seen. Brett Morrison notices. Of course he notices. You do not survive combat without learning to read environmental warning signs. But he dismisses it. Weather is always weird in December. Animals are skittish. Barometric pressure fluctuates. It means nothing. Eleanor Hartwell sits in her cabin on the evening of December 28th. She has a photograph of Daniel on the small table beside her chair. They are young in the photo, happy, standing in front of the Chicago warehouse that will kill him back when it was just blueprints and possibility. She does not cry, has not cried since the day she left Chicago. She simply looks at his face and whispers, "I did the math right this time. I won't fail again." Outside, the sky deepens to the color of an old bruise. The first flakes begin to fall. 72 hours to convergence. The beast is waking. January 1st arrives with a silence that men who have been to war recognize instantly. The kind of silence that means something is watching you. Deputy Jack Reeves feels it first. He is 35 years old, former Marine, served 2 tours in Afghanistan before coming home to Pine Ridge to be closer to his aging parents. He knows the difference between normal quiet and the quiet that precedes violence. He steps out of the sheriff's office at dawn and stops on the wooden porch coffee mug halfway to his lips. The air is wrong, not cold, not yet. 42 degrees unseasonably warm for January in Montana, but the pressure, the atmospheric pressure, feels like someone is just pressing down on the valley with an invisible hand. Jack pulls out his phone and checks the barometric reading. 30.15 inches of mercury. Dropping. He thinks about Eleanor Hartwell up on Screaming Ridge, the engineer everyone calls crazy, the woman who warned them about convergence events and atmospheric patterns and structural failure. He thinks about Afghanistan 2004, 3 days before a freak blizzard killed 12 soldiers in the mountains near Kandahar. The barometric pressure had dropped exactly like this, the local Afghans had known. They tried to warn the Americans. Nobody listened. 18 men went on patrol. 12 never came back. Jack Reeves dumps his coffee into the snow and goes back inside to pull the emergency preparedness files. Eleanor sits at her kitchen table logging data. January 1st, 0600 hours, barometric pressure 30.15, dropping 0.15 per hour. Temperature 42 degrees Fahrenheit. Wind calm, sky overcast, cloud ceiling 8,000 feet. Convergence probability 94%. Time to event 168 hours plus or minus 12. She closes the logbook and looks out the window at the valley below. From this height, she can see the entire town. The houses with their peaked roofs, the elementary school with Brett Morrison's new addition, that beautiful 60-foot timber truss span, the high school gymnasium with its wide flat roof, all of it rated for 40 pounds per square foot, all of it about to experience 80. She could go down there, could stand in the middle of Main Street and scream warnings until her voice gives out, could show them the data, the correlations, the mathematical certainty of what is coming. But she remembers Chicago, remembers standing in that conference room with irrefutable evidence and watching men in suits decide that their experience mattered more than her calculations. She remembers Daniel's funeral. No, if they will not listen to data, they will learn from experience. She has done her part. She has warned them. She has built her shelter. Now she waits. The temperature swings begin. 45 degrees during the day, 18 degrees at night. The kind of violent fluctuation that meteorologists call atmospheric instability. Warm Pacific air pushing inland, colliding with probing fingers of Arctic cold. The animals know. Every deer in the valley vanishes overnight. They flee into the deep limestone caves on the north face of the mountains, ancient shelters that have protected their ancestors through ice ages. Birds disappear. The ravens that usually scavenge behind the diner are gone. Sparrows, magpies, even the hardy mountain chickadees that can survive 40 below, all of them silent and absent. Brett Morrison notices at the job site. "Where are all the damn crows?" his foreman Rick asks, looking up at empty sky. Brett shrugs. "Flew south early probably, mild winter." But Rick shakes his head. He is Shoshone, born and raised on the reservation before moving to Pine Ridge. His grandmother taught him to read weather signs that white men ignore. Animals don't leave for mild weather, Brett. They leave before bad weather. It's January in Montana. There's always bad weather coming. Rick does not argue. But he goes home that night, and moves his family's important documents and heirlooms to the basement, just in case. The barometric pressure crosses the critical threshold, 29.40 inches of mercury. Eleanor's alarm goes off. She has programmed it to trigger at this exact reading. She silences it and picks up her radio. Old Bob Sullivan's voice crackles through. Eleanor, you seeing this pressure? Confirmed, 29.4. Oh, how long? 72 hours, maybe 60. There is a long pause. Then Bob says quietly, I'm moving my important things to the root cellar. Told my grandson to do the same. He thinks I'm being paranoid. You're being smart. Eleanor, yes. Thank you for trying to warn them, even if they didn't listen. She does not respond, just sets down the radio and goes to check her supplies one final time. Water, 20 gallons in sealed containers. Food, military MRS enough for 2 weeks, firewood, 3 cords stacked and covered. Medical supplies, trauma kit antibiotics, pain medication, tools, generator welding rig hand tools. Everything she needs to survive alone while the world outside collapses. Jack Reeves drives up the mountain that afternoon. Eleanor hears the engine, sees the sheriff's department SUV pull up to her cabin. She considers not answering the door. But Jack has always been polite to her, never joined the mockery. She opens the door. Jack stands there in his uniform holding a clipboard, but his eyes are serious. Miss Hartwell, official visit. What can I do for you, deputy? I need to ask, that convergence event you predicted, how certain are you? Eleanor meets his eyes. 94% probability, 72 hours. Jack nods slowly. I served in Afghanistan, saw weather like this once before a storm that killed 12 men. Barometric pressure dropped exactly like this. You believe me. I trust data, and I trust combat experience. This feels wrong. Tell people to reinforce structures. Get to masonry buildings if roofs fail. I'll try, but Brett Morrison's opinion carries more weight in this town than mine. Eleanor almost smiles. Then we'll see whose judgment was correct. Jack looks at the stone shield arching over her cabin. That thing really going to hold? Yes. Mind if I bring my parents up here if things get bad? Eleanor considers this, then nods. Radio first. Don't just show up. Jack touches his hat brim. Thank you, ma'am. He drives away thinking that maybe the crazy lady isn't so crazy after all. The rain begins, gentle at first. Soft drops pattering on roofs, running down gutters, soaking into ground still frozen from the previous week's cold snap. Temperature 35 degrees. Brett Morrison sits in his living room with his wife Martha. They have been married 28 years. She knows when he is worried, even when he pretends not to be. Should we be concerned, she asks. Brett looks out the window at the rain. It's just rain. We'll get snow, maybe a foot. Nothing unusual. But his mind is working, running calculations. He designed his own roof 15 years ago. Timber trusses standard pitch rated for 50 pounds per square foot, overbuilt by 25% the way he builds everything. It will hold. Of course it will hold. He has been building in this valley for 25 years. 0 failures. Martha watches him and says nothing. The temperature drops to 28 degrees in 20 minutes. Rain becomes sleet. Ice pellets rattling against windows like thrown gravel, accumulating at 1 inch per hour, glazing every surface with a coating of frozen glass. Eleanor monitors from her cabin. She has a NOAA weather radio, a handheld anemometer, a digital thermometer with remote sensors. Sleet accumulation rate 1.2 inches per hour. Wind speed increasing now 30 miles per hour from the west. She walks outside, stands beneath the stone shield, looks up. The sleet hits the parabolic curve and slides away. Cannot find purchase on the polymer-sealed surface. The western slope deflects the wind up and over, creating a pocket of calm air directly beneath the arch. Exactly as designed. She goes back inside and makes coffee. The Arctic vortex arrives. It does not announce itself with fanfare. There is no dramatic temperature plunge, no sudden wind shift. It simply arrives like an invading army cresting a hill. Temperature drops from 28 to 15 degrees in 20 minutes. The sleet becomes snow. But not normal snow, not the light powder that skiers dream about, not the fluffy accumulation that children build snowmen from. Sierra cement, Wet, heavy, saturated with water. Each snowflake is a tiny ice crystal coated in liquid water that freezes on contact. The flakes fall in clumps the size of silver dollars, accumulating at 4 inches per hour, packing down under their own weight into dense layers that weigh 20 pounds per cubic foot, 4 times heavier than normal snow. Eleanor checks her calculations one last time. 4 inches per hour, 20 pounds per cubic foot. In 6 hours, the valley will have 2 feet of Sierra cement, 40 pounds per square foot, at the building code limit. But the snow will not stop at 6 hours. The Pacific moisture plume is still feeding the system. The Arctic vortex is stalled in place, not moving. The convergence will continue for 12 hours, 18, maybe 24. By dawn, the load will exceed 80 pounds per square foot, and Brett Morrison's roofs are rated for 40. Wyatt Sullivan wakes to a sound like a cannon shot. His horse barn, brand new, built 6 months ago by Morrison Construction, with the finest materials money could buy, collapses in 3 seconds. The center ridgeline fails. The trusses fold inward. 40 tons of wet snow and timber and metal roofing crash down onto the concrete floor where his prize quarter horses were stabled until yesterday, when old Bob convinced him to move them to a neighbor's lower pasture. Wyatt runs to the window, looks out into the blizzard. His barn is gone, flattened, just a pile of splintered wood buried under a white mountain. He looks up at his own house ceiling, sees the drywall tape along the seam starting to wrinkle. "Martha," he says quietly, "we need to leave. Now." Brett Morrison sits by his fireplace with a bourbon he is not drinking. He is listening to his house, the way a combat engineer learns to listen to bridges for the sounds of stress fractures, the way a builder learns to hear the voice of structures under load. His house is groaning, subtle, deep, the sound of timber compressing, of nails pulling, of joints bearing weight they were never designed to carry. He stands up, puts his hand on the ceiling drywall. It is vibrating. He goes to the garage, climbs the ladder to the attic access, shines a flashlight up into the space between ceiling and roof. The center truss is bowing. Not much, maybe 2 inches, but it is bowing. Brett Morrison has seen enough structural failures in his life to know what comes next. He does the math in his head. Math he learned in the jungle, calculating whether a bridge can hold an M48 tank, whether a bunker can withstand mortar fire. Truss rated for 40 pounds per square foot. Current snow depth visible through the roof vents, 30 inches. Sierra cement, wet, heavy, at least 70 pounds per square foot. Oh God, she was right. Brett runs down from the attic. Martha is standing in the hallway, eyes wide. "Brett, what's wrong? Get to the basement. Now." "What's happening?" "The roof is failing. Move." They run for the basement stairs. Brett's hand is on the railing when the ridgeline truss shears completely. The sound is not a crack. It is a detonation. 12,000 pounds of snow and ice and timber held, suspended 40 feet above the ground, suddenly released from the structure that was containing it. The roof folds inward. The walls no longer braced from above buckle outward. Windows explode from the pressure change. Drywall tears like tissue paper. Brett and Martha dive through the basement door, roll down the stairs as debris rains down behind them. The door above slams shut from the pressure wave, sealing them in darkness. They lie at the bottom of the stairs, breathing hard, covered in dust. Above them, the sounds of their home dying, groaning, cracking, settling into ruin. Brett Morrison built that roof with his own hands, installed every truss, drove every nail, certified it safe for his family, and it failed. He pulls himself up, helps Martha to her feet. They climb the stairs, push open the door that is now jammed at an angle, emerge into what used to be their living room. The entire center of the house is gone. Caved in, the walls are still standing, but the roof between them has collapsed completely, leaving a crater filled with snow and splintered timber. Brett stands there, snowflakes falling on his face through the open sky where his ceiling used to be. He is 53 years old. He survived Vietnam, built a business from nothing, earned the respect of every person in this valley through 25 years of quality work. And in one night, he was proven catastrophically wrong by a woman from Chicago who spent 2 years dragging rocks up a mountain. The professional failure cuts deeper than any physical injury. Martha grabs his arm. "We can't stay here. Where do we go?" Brett looks down at the valley. In the darkness lit only by the white reflection of snow, he can see shapes that should not exist. Flat where there should be peaks, collapsed structures, his roofs, failing one by one. Then he looks up the mountain. At the single light still burning at the peak of Screaming Ridge, Eleanor Hartwell's cabin, the tomb, the folly, the medieval fortress, still standing. Up, Brett says. We go up. Up where Screaming Ridge, Eleanor's place. Martha stares at him. She'll never let us in, not after how we treated her. Brett pulls on his coat, hands Martha hers. She doesn't have to like us. She just has to be right. And she was right. He thinks about the stone shield, the parabolic arch, the compression load path, all of it designed to do exactly what his trusses could not: survive. That structure is the only thing in this valley that will hold, Brett says. Physics doesn't care about personal feelings. They climb out through a window, step into waist-deep snow. Temperature is -5 degrees Fahrenheit. Wind is howling at 85 miles per hour. Visibility is 10 feet. Brett has his truck. He gets it started, begins driving up the mountain road. A quarter-mile up, the truck buries itself in a drift. Engine chokes, dies. They abandon it, start walking. Brett Morrison is a big man, strong, but he is also 53 years old, and hypothermia does not care about your resume. 100 yards up the slope, he sees figures struggling ahead. Wyatt Sullivan and his wife fighting through the snow. Wyatt, they turn, see Brett and Martha. Wait. The four of them group together, sharing body heat, sharing the terrible understanding that they are all fleeing toward the one place they tried to destroy. Eleanor's, Wyatt asks. Brett nods. They climb together. The mountain is trying to kill them. Wind tears at their clothes, snow blinds them. Temperature is now -10 degrees with wind chill approaching -35. Frostbite gnaws at exposed skin. Hypothermia creeps into core temperature. Distance to Eleanor's cabin, 0.8 of a mile. Elevation gains 600 feet. In summer, an easy 20-minute hike. Tonight, a battle for survival. Brett takes point, using his body to break trail. Wyatt beside him. The two women behind in the lee. They make 50 yards before hitting the first obstacle. A ponderosa pine, 70 feet tall, has uprooted. Thousands of pounds of ice accumulated on its branches, the weight too much for roots to hold. It fell across the trail, creating a wall of frozen branches 8 feet high. Brett and Wyatt try to go around. The slopes on either side are too steep, too unstable. They have to go through. Brett still has a tire iron in his coat pocket. He uses it like a machete, breaking frozen branches, creating a gap. Wyatt helps, bare hands bleeding from the sharp ice. 15 minutes of brutal labor. They create an opening, crawl through, all four of them covered in blood and ice. Martha is crying, not from pain, from cold, from exhaustion, from the understanding that they might not make it. Brett pulls her close. We're halfway. Keep moving. They continue up. The wind is a physical enemy. It hits them like punches, 90 miles per hour gusts that stagger even Brett's bulk. Wyatt goes down. Brett hauls him up. They lock arms. 4 people moving as one unit because alone they will die. Another 200 yards. Brett's legs are going numb, not from cold, from exertion, from pushing through snow that is chest high in the drifts. He can see Wyatt faltering. The younger man's face is gray, lips blue. Come on, Brett shouts. 100 more yards. Wyatt tries, takes 10 more steps, collapses. Brett drops down beside him. Get up. Can't. Leave me. Get the women safe. Brett grabs Wyatt's coat, pulls him close so their faces are inches apart. You think I carried a radio operator 6 miles through the jungle with a bullet in my leg to leave you here? Get the fuck up. Something in Brett's eyes. Something from 1970, from a firefight in the Central Highlands, from a place where quitting meant dying. Wyatt gets up. They move forward. And then, like crossing a threshold into another dimension, they reach Eleanor's property line. The wind stops, not gradually, instantly. One moment they are being battered by 90 miles per hour gusts. The next moment, absolute calm. Brett looks up, blinking snow from his eyes. Above them, a stone shield rises like the hull of an enormous ship. The western face of the parabolic arch is catching the full force of the wind and vaulting it up and over. The aerodynamic curve is creating a pocket of still air beneath. They are standing in the lee, in the shelter. The ground here is almost dry. No snow accumulation. The arch is shedding everything. Brett Morrison, combat engineer veteran of 100 construction sites, looks at this structure and understands with absolute clarity that he has just witnessed perfect engineering. He tries to take another step. His legs give out. Wyatt catches him. Together, the four of them stagger to Eleanor's porch. Wyatt pounds on the door. The deadbolt clicks. The door opens. Eleanor Hartwell stands backlit by kerosene lamps. She holds a wool blanket in one hand. Her face is expressionless. No smugness. No told you so. Just the clinical assessment of an engineer evaluating structural damage. She looks at four people who tried to destroy her, who mocked her, who threatened legal action. Four people who are minutes from death. Get inside, Eleanor says, stepping back, before you lose your fingers. The interior of Eleanor Hartwell's cabin is a capsule of impossible normalcy. While the apocalypse rages 50 feet above their heads, while the valley below tears itself apart under the weight of the sky, this small wooden structure sits in perfect silence. Not a creak, not a groan, not a single vibration. The cast iron wood stove radiates heat so intense it hurts to stand too close. Kerosene lamps cast steady yellow light across drafting tables covered in blueprints and structural diagrams. The air smells of wood smoke and coffee and the metallic tang of fresh snow melting off frozen clothing. Brett Morrison stands just inside the door, dripping, shaking, staring at Eleanor Hartwell like she is a ghost. She hands him a wool blanket. Military surplus, thick and scratchy. Then another to Martha, to Wyatt, to Wyatt's wife. Sit by the stove, Eleanor says. Not unkind, but not warm. Clinical. Rewarm slowly. Don't rub frostbitten skin. She brings them coffee, black strong enough to strip paint. Pours it from a percolator that sits on the stovetop like it has been waiting for guests. Brett wraps his hands around the mug. His fingers are white at the tips, frostbite setting in. But the pain as circulation returns is a distant thing, background noise to the professional assessment his mind is performing. He is looking at the structure around him, looking at the ceiling, at the walls, at the way the wooden cabin sits completely isolated from the stone shell above it. He is listening to the silence. Outside, he can hear the storm, muted, distant, like listening to the ocean from inside a submarine. The wind screams overhead, but it does not touch this place. Brett Morrison has evaluated structural integrity in combat zones, has calculated load-bearing capacity while mortar rounds fell. He knows when a building is under stress and when it is serene. This cabin is serene. The stone shield above is absorbing everything, every ounce of wind force, every pound of snow load. Catching it, distributing it, channeling it down through steel and stone into the bedrock beneath. The cabin itself bears no weight, no stress, no strain. It is perfect engineering. Brett looks at Eleanor. She is sitting at her drafting table updating a logbook, recording wind speed, temperature, barometric pressure, working while four half-frozen people huddle around her stove. Why isn't it shattering? Brett asks. His voice is hoarse from shouting over wind. Stone is brittle in tension. Eleanor does not look up from her log. There is no tension, only compression. Explain. Now she looks at him, studies his face for a long moment, deciding whether he is actually asking or just challenging. She sees genuine curiosity, professional interest. She pulls a blank sheet of paper from the drafting table, picks up a pencil, begins sketching. Parabolic curve, she says, drawing the arch profile. Every load vector points downward and inward. Snow accumulates on top. Gravity pulls it down, but the curve redirects that force. Her pencil traces arrows showing force paths. Each stone is squeezed against the stone beside it. Compression. The ribs channel compression down to the bedrock anchors. No bending moment, no tensile stress, just pure axial compression. Brett leans forward, studying the diagram. His engineer's mind, trained in jungle clearings and on construction sites, recognizes the elegance. Load path clarity, he says quietly. No moment loading. Exactly. I spent 25 years building flexural resistance systems, trusses designed to bend and flex under load. Flexion works for moderate loads. For extreme loads, you need compression geometry. Brett sits back, looks at his coffee, thinks about his house, about the 70 roofs he built across this valley, using the same principles, the same methods, the same confidence that had just been proven catastrophically wrong. How many of my roofs are failing right now? Eleanor's voice is flat, factual. All of them. Not cruel, just true. Brett closes his eyes. 25 years of work, 200 structures. His reputation built on quality and reliability. Gone. Martha reaches over and takes his hand. She knows her husband well enough to understand that this professional failure cuts deeper than the physical danger they just survived. Wyatt Sullivan speaks up from his corner by the stove. Eleanor, I owe you an apology. She looks at him, waits. I led that petition, gathered signatures, called your structure an eyesore, testified against you at the town hall. Yes, and you just saved my life. Eleanor shrugs. I designed the structure to withstand the convergence event. You being inside it when the event occurred is incidental to the design parameters. Wyatt almost laughs. Even now, even after being proven spectacularly right, she cannot help speaking like an engineer. Still, he says, thank you. Eleanor nods once, returns to her logbook. The silence stretches. Outside, the storm continues its assault. Inside, 4 people sit with their mistakes. Then the radio crackles to life. Eleanor has a ham radio set up in the corner. Battery powered. She has been monitoring emergency frequencies all night. Static. Then a voice, tight with panic. Anyone on frequency, this is Deputy Jack Reeves, Pine Ridge Emergency Dispatch. Do you copy? Eleanor crosses to the radio in 3 strides, grabs the microphone. Jack, this is Eleanor Hartwell, clear signal from Screaming Ridge. What's your situation? The relief in Jack's voice is palpable. Eleanor, thank God, we have a mass casualty incident developing. Over 200 people evacuated to the high school gymnasium when residential roofs started failing. But the gym roof is sagging, central span down 18 inches. We can hear the trusses popping. It's going to collapse. We can't evacuate them. Roads are impassable. Eleanor, we need help. Brett Morrison is on his feet before Jack finishes speaking. His face goes pale. Not from cold, from professional horror. The high school, he says, voice tight. I built that roof 2 years ago. He turns to Eleanor. Wide span flat truss system. 80-foot span. If it's sagging 18 inches, those trusses are at failure limit. Minutes, not hours. Eleanor is already moving, pulling on her heavy winter gear, thick insulated coat, waterproof pants, boots rated to -40. Martha stares. What are you doing going to help? In this storm, that's suicide. Eleanor pauses, looks at Martha, then at Brett, then at the radio. 200 people, trapped under a failing roof. People who mocked her, who tried to destroy her home, who laughed when she warned them. She could stay here, safe, warm, vindicated. She could let them learn the consequences of ignoring engineers. But she sees Daniel's face. Remember Chicago. Remember standing in her office watching ambulances scream toward the warehouse. Remembers the guilt that has lived in her chest for 5 years. I wasn't loud enough. I didn't fight hard enough. Daniel died because I accepted defeat. Not this time. It's not suicide, Eleanor says quietly. It's engineering under pressure. She looks at Brett. The structural pillars in the gymnasium. Load-bearing steel or decorative masonry. Brett blinks, processes. His mind shifts from shock into professional mode. Steel, 6-inch core wrapped in brick veneer. Eleanor nods. Her engineering brain is already working, calculating, designing. Roof fails from center outward. If we create artificial support columns under the main truss nodes, we divide the wide span into smaller segments. Reduce bending moment. Buy time for the storm to pass. With what equipment? I have 8 20-ton hydraulic jacks, 40 sections of schedule 80 steel pipe, welding plates, cribbing blocks. Brett stares at her. You're going to shore the roof from inside. Yes. That could work. Force the compression into lateral bracing, cut the span stress in half. But we have to get the equipment down the mountain, through the storm, now. Wyatt stands. I'm coming. Eleanor looks at him. You have frostbite. You can barely stand. Brett can barely stand either. You need muscle to haul the sled. Martha grabs Wyatt's arm. This is insane. But Wyatt pulls free gently, looks at his wife. 200 people, Martha. We laughed at Eleanor. We were wrong. I need to help fix this. There is a knock at the door. Eleanor opens it. Old Bob Sullivan stands there, 92 years old, wearing a coat from 1960 and boots held together with duct tape, completely unaffected by the cold that nearly killed 4 younger people. I'm coming, Bob says. Bob, you're 92. I survived 1912. I'll survive this. You need someone who knows the school layout. I was on the construction crew in 1953 when they built it. Eleanor looks at this old man, at Brett hypothermic and frostbitten, at Wyatt barely recovered from the climb, at herself, one structural engineer against a mountain and a storm in physics. She makes the calculation. 4 people, minimal viable team. Martha, you monitor the radio. Keep the fire going. If we're not back in 6 hours, contact Jack and tell him we failed. Martha nods, tears in her eyes. Eleanor opens the workshop door, reveals a heavy-duty toboggan sled loaded with equipment, 8 hydraulic jacks, each weighing 60 pounds, 40 steel pipes, welding plates, cribbing blocks, 800 pounds of gear. Brett helps her drag it outside. Wyatt and Bob take the tether ropes. The storm hits them like a physical wall the moment they step beyond the stone shield's protection. Wind, snow, cold that steals breath from lungs. Eleanor shouts over the chaos. Gravity is our advantage. Keep the sled tethered. If it builds momentum, it'll break our legs. Controlled descent. Do not stop. They begin moving down the mountain. The descent is warfare. Brett takes point, using Eleanor's ice axe to chop footholds into frozen drifts. Each step has to be carved from ice. Each foot of progress earned with sweat that freezes on skin. Behind him, Wyatt and old Bob control the sled, ropes taut, digging heels into snow to break. The toboggan wants to slide, wants to accelerate down the slope and tear free and tumble into darkness. Eleanor moves between positions, checking the load, adjusting ropes, calling out obstacles. The visibility is 5 feet. The wind is a constant scream. Temperature is negative 15 degrees and falling. 300 yards down, they hit the ice field. The entire slope is a sheet of black ice hidden under 6 inches of powder. The sled hits it and immediately begins sliding. Dig in, Wyatt shouts. He and Bob lean back on the ropes, boots skidding, no purchase. The sled accelerates. Brett sees it happening, sees the physics. 800 pounds gaining momentum. If they lose control now, the sled will hit 30 miles per hour before it crashes and everything will be destroyed. He makes a decision born from combat engineering, from controlled demolitions, from understanding that sometimes you have to surrender to physics and redirect rather than resist. Wyatt, release. What? Let go, I'll pendulum it. Wyatt releases his rope. Brett alone holds the sled now, all 800 pounds pulling on one man. He does not fight it. Instead, he runs at an angle, using his body weight and the sled's momentum to swing the whole mass sideways. The sled carves a wide arc, slams into a snowbank, stops. Brett goes down, nearly pulled off the cliff edge. Wyatt grabs him, hauls him back. They lie in the snow, breathing hard. Good call, Wyatt gasps. Combat engineering, controlled chaos. They get up, keep moving. 500 yards down, old Bob suddenly stops. Hold. Everyone freezes. Avalanche chute ahead, 40 feet across, unstable. Eleanor moves up beside him, pulls out a flashlight, shines it across the slope. She can see the terrain feature, a wide gully where snow has accumulated deep and loose, the kind of formation that slides with minimal trigger. We have to cross, Brett says. No alternate route. Bob nods. One at a time. Minimize weight. Eleanor goes first. She is lightest, 135 pounds versus Brett's 220. She steps carefully, ice axe probing, testing each foothold, moving with the precision of someone who has calculated slope angles and coefficient of friction and understands exactly how much force this snowpack can tolerate before it fails. 40 feet, 30, 20, a sound like a gunshot. The slab releases above her. Avalanche, Eleanor runs, does not look back, just sprints across the last 20 feet as the slope above her begins to move. 10,000 pounds of snow and ice roaring down the chute behind her. She reaches the far side, dives, rolls. The avalanche screams past, missing her by 6 feet. She stands up, breathing hard, looks back across the chute. Brett, Wyatt, and Bob are safe on the other side. The avalanche cut between them. Now they have to cross a chute that just proved it will slide. Brett does not hesitate, clips the sled to his rope, runs it across on a diagonal using speed and momentum to cross before the slope can react. The sled makes it, barely, then Wyatt, then Bob, go them across. Team intact. They keep moving. 800 yards down, they encounter a fallen ponderosa pine, 70 feet of trunk, 6 feet diameter. Brett and Wyatt recognize it immediately. The same massive tree that blocked their path on the climb up hours earlier, completely blocking the descent route. Brett examines it. We need to go through, can't go around. That's solid pine, Eleanor says. Hours to chop through with axes. Old Bob steps forward. Fire. They all turn. Bob's face is calm. 1912, my father cleared snow-blocked roads with fire. Pine burns hot, even wet. Brett's eyes light up. Eleanor, any accelerant in the sled? Mineral spirits, for cleaning welding epoxy. They pour it on the trunk at the narrowest point. Brett pulls waterproof matches from his survival kit. Lights the accelerant. The pine resin catches, burns with intense heat despite the snow and wind. The wood is dead dry inside despite the wet exterior. Fire eats through it. 12 minutes. The trunk burns through, cracks, falls away. Path clear. Outstanding, Brett says to Bob. Tricks, Bob replies. They reach the valley floor 90 minutes after leaving the cabin. The town is unrecognizable. Collapsed houses, crushed barns, vehicles buried so deep only antenna tips show. Downed power lines sparking against wet wood. Everything dark, everything broken. But the high school stands, brick structure, solid walls. But the roof is visibly failing. The center span sags like a hammock, 24 inches of deflection now. Worse than when Jack radioed, getting worse by the minute. Brett stares at his work, at the trusses he designed and installed, at the failure in progress. Let's move, Eleanor says. They drag the sled to the entrance. The doors are buried under 7 feet of drift. Brett and Wyatt dig, bare hands, steel plates used as shovels. 20 minutes of brutal labor. They create a tunnel, just wide enough to drag the sled through. Inside the gymnasium is a scene of controlled terror. 200 people pressed against the perimeter walls. Families huddled together. Children crying. Adults praying. Deputy Jack Reeves moving among them. Trying to maintain calm. Trying to keep people away from the center where the ceiling is dying. Above them, the roof groans. A sound like a ship breaking apart. The massive laminated timber trusses are visibly bowed. Drywall cracks spider across the ceiling. Fine sawdust rains down. Paint chips. The physical manifestation of structural failure in slow motion. Jack sees Eleanor enter with the team and the sled. Relief floods his face. Eleanor, thank God. She does not waste time with greetings. Immediately begins assessing the structure. Looking up. Calculating deflection. Estimating remaining time to failure. Her voice cuts through the gymnasium. Command voice. The voice of someone who has run construction sites and will not tolerate chaos. Deputy, clear center court. Everyone against the masonry walls. Now. Jack does not question, just starts moving people. His authority plus Eleanor's certainty creates instant obedience. People scramble. Parents grab children. The center court clears. Eleanor turns to Brett, Wyatt, Bob. Unpack the sled. I need Jack's positioned at 4 points. Brett, identify the truss nodes. Brett is already looking up, his professional eye finding the critical points. The main gusset plates where trusses join, the stress concentration points. 4 locations, he says, points with a laser from Eleanor's kit. Those gusset plates on the bottom cords. Under those points, we can transfer load. Agreed. Start with foundation prep. They move like a military unit. Wyatt and Bob lay out wooden cribbing blocks, 12-inch by 12-inch by 4-inch lumber, creating stable bases that distribute point loads across the suspended gym floor. Heavy steel plates on top of the cribbing, 2 feet by 2 feet, spreading load even further. Then the steel pipes, Schedule 80, heavy gauge, threaded together to create vertical columns reaching 22 feet to the sagging trusses. The hydraulic jacks at the base, 20-ton capacity each. Positioned, checked, 4 minutes to set up. Above them, a massive crack shoots across the ceiling. Drywall tears. The crowd screams. Everyone on jacks, Eleanor orders. Brett, Jack, Wyatt, myself, 1 per jack. Old Bob supervises, watches for uneven lifting. Eleanor's voice is steady. We pump synchronously. Uneven lift creates lateral shear. Roof slides sideways instead of being supported. On my mark. 1, 2, pump. 4 people throw weight onto jack levers. Clack. The ratchet sound echoes. Steel columns rise 1/4 inch. Make contact with timber trusses. Resistance is immense for Barnum. Again, the pump. Clack. Columns pressing against trusses, forcing them upward, fighting thousands of pounds of accumulated snow. Keep going. Pump. Clack. 5 strokes. 6, 7. Deputy Jack Reeves watches the ceiling. It's working. Sag is stabilizing. Don't stop. Pump. Clack. Stroke 10. Suddenly, a sound like a cannon. The hardwood floor beneath jack number 3 buckles. The localized pressure is too intense. The suspended floor system cannot handle it. The steel plate tilts. The column shifts 3 inches out of plumb. Stop, Eleanor screams. Floor failure. Above them, the roof responds instantly to the loss of support. A massive boom. The entire center section drops 2 inches. The crowd panics. People scream. Children cry. Parents shield them with their bodies expecting the sky to fall. Brett's mind races. Plate footprint too small, punching through the subfloor. Eleanor's eyes scan the gym, looking for solutions, seeing the folded steel bleachers against the wall. Bleacher rails, C-channel steel, rip them out. Brett, Jack, and Wyatt sprint to the bleachers. Use tire irons. Use the ice axe. Smash locking bolts. Tear out the bottom rails. 10-foot lengths of heavy C-channel. 6-inch channel depth. Drag them back to the failing jack. Crosshatch under the plate, Eleanor directs, creates distributed bearing area. Brett releases pressure on the jack. They slide the C-channels underneath in an X pattern. 100 square feet of steel now bearing against the floor instead of 4. Reset the cribbing. Reset the plate. Reset the jack. It's set, Brett gasps. But this is our last chance. Then we make it count. Everyone ready. 4 voices ready. Drive it home. Pump. They crank the jacks with everything they have. Clack, clack, clack. Rapid pumping. The C-channels bow under the pressure, but they hold. The load distributes. The floor holds. The ceiling makes a sound like the world ending. Twisting wood. Tearing metal. The crowd covers their heads, but the roof does not fall. Instead, the immense crushing pressure transfers off the horizontal trusses. The force travels down the steel columns, through the hydraulic jacks, across the C-channel rails, into the concrete foundation beneath the floor. The sagging ceiling stops sagging, then rises. 1 full inch. The splintering stops. The cracking ceases. The sawdust rain ends. Silence. Brett checks the columns with a level. Plumb, load transferred. Eleanor listens to the structure, puts her hand on a column, feels the steady compression. No vibration, no stress fractures propagating. Shear points stable, system holding. Jack Reeves turns to the crowd. We're safe, the roof is stable. The gymnasium erupts, not in cheers, in crying, in relief, in the overwhelming gratitude of people who just stared at death and lived. Brett Morrison collapses backward, sits on the gym floor. exhausted, frostbitten, humbled. He looks at Eleanor Hartwell, this woman he dismissed, this engineer he called paranoid. "You saved them," he says quietly. "You saved us all." Eleanor sits down beside him. "We saved them. You, me, Jack, Wyatt, Bob, team effort. You designed it. You executed it. Combat engineering showed." Brett almost smiles. "Guess the jungle taught me something after all." They sit there, two engineers, different training, different experience, united by the understanding that physics does not care about your pride. The storm continues outside, but inside the fortress holds. 4 hours later, dawn breaks. The wind dies. The snow stops. Temperature rises to 5 degrees Fahrenheit. Brutal cold, but clear. People push open the gymnasium doors, step into blinding sunlight reflected off fresh snow. The valley is destroyed. 40 houses collapsed. 15 barns crushed. Every roof that Brett Morrison built in 25 years failed. But 0 deaths. Everyone made it to the gym. Everyone survived. 200 people step out into the snow and turn their faces upward. High above the ruined valley, standing alone at the peak of Screaming Ridge, the stone shield gleams in morning sun. Perfect, untouched, defiant. The only structure in 50 square miles that survived intact. Brett Morrison stands beside Eleanor. Slowly removes his hard hat, a gesture of absolute respect. "I've been a builder for 30 years, he says. "Combat engineer before that. I thought I knew what strength looked like." Pause. "I was wrong, that is strength." Eleanor looks at him. "That's physics, applied correctly. Will you teach me?" "Yes, on one condition." "Name it." "No more dismissing engineers because they're from cities. No more assuming experience trumps data. No more pride over physics." Brett extends his hand. "Deal." They shake, professional equals, mutual respect earned through fire. The work of rebuilding begins immediately. Pine Ridge cannot wait. Families need shelter. The cold will not pause for mourning or bureaucracy. Within hours of the storm breaking, the valley floor is alive with the sound of chainsaws and generators, people digging out their homes, assessing damage, salvaging what can be saved. Brett Morrison and Eleanor Hartwell do not rest. They walk through the wreckage together. Eleanor with her engineering pad, Brett with his tape measure, documenting failures, identifying patterns, learning from disaster. Eleanor photographs every collapsed truss, measures deflection angles, calculates the actual snow load from depth and density. The data confirms her predictions. 82 pounds per square foot, exactly what the historical records from 1912 indicated. Brett follows her silent, taking notes, seeing his mistakes laid bare in splintered timber and crushed drywall. Every failure is his design, his signature, his legacy. At the elementary school, they stand in the ruined addition. The 60-foot timber truss span Brett built just 6 months ago has pancaked completely. The beautiful open classroom is now a crater of broken wood and twisted metal. "I was so proud of this," Brett says quietly. "Longest clear span I ever built. Thought it would last 100 years. Eleanor measures the failure point. The central gusset plate sheared, exactly where maximum bending moment concentrated under asymmetric loading. Could it have been saved? With proper reinforcement, parabolic arch over the span, or reduce the span with intermediate supports. Brett nods, learning, absorbing, rebuilding his understanding from the ground up. They work for 3 days straight, surveying every collapsed structure in the valley. Eleanor drafts new building codes. 85 pounds per square foot minimum, mandatory parabolic reinforcement for spans over 40 feet, steel compression ribs for public buildings. On the 4th day, they stand in the ruins of Brett's house, the house he built with his own hands 15 years ago, the house where he raised his children, the house that failed while he slept inside. The roof is gone. The walls are damaged beyond repair, but the foundation is sound. "Start over," Eleanor asks. Brett looks at the debris, at the timber that betrayed him, then up at the mountain at the stone shield gleaming in the distance. "Start over," he confirms, "but this time we do it right." They design it together over the next 2 weeks. Brett's practical knowledge of Montana construction, Eleanor's theoretical understanding of extreme load conditions. The result is a hybrid structure, unlike anything Pine Ridge has seen. Timber frame for the walls, traditional Montana craftsmanship, but over the main living area, a parabolic stone arch, not as massive as Eleanor's shield, but built on the same principles. Compression geometry, load distribution, stone sealed against freeze-thaw. It takes 3 months to build. Eleanor works alongside Brett's crew, teaching them the mathematics of compression, showing them how to calculate load paths, training them to think like engineers while working like craftsmen. The crew, initially skeptical, becomes fascinated. These are men who work with their hands, who understand leverage and weight and balance through muscle memory. Eleanor gives them the equations that explain what their bodies already know. By April, Brett's new house is complete. The timber frame is beautiful. Traditional log construction with massive Douglas fir beams. But above it, the stone arch curves like a protective hand. River stones from the Whitefish River, just like Eleanor's. Mortared with high tensile epoxy, sealed against the elements. It is a house that honors both tradition and innovation, that respects the past while learning from catastrophe. Brett hosts a dinner the night it is finished. Eleanor, Jack Reeves, Old Bob, Wyatt and Martha, the people who survived the convergence together. They eat at a table under the parabolic arch of river stones mortared into the ceiling. Eleanor's design, Brett's construction. The food is simple: roasted venison from Bob's freezer, potatoes from Martha's root cellar, bread from Sarah Fletcher's bakery, which reopened last week in a temporary structure. To second chances, Brett says, raising his glass. To listening to engineers, Wyatt adds. To surviving what tries to kill you, Old Bob says quietly. Eleanor says nothing, but she smiles, the first real smile in 6 years. After dinner, she and Brett step outside. The April evening is cool but not cold. Spring coming to the mountains, snowmelt running in rivulets down the slope. I've been thinking, Brett says, about making this partnership official. Eleanor looks at him. Morrison Hartwell Engineering, he continues. We rebuild this valley the right way, together. Your theory, my practice. What do you say? Eleanor considers. She came to Pine Ridge to hide, to survive alone, to prove she was right while the world burned. But somewhere between the stone shield and the gymnasium rescue, between teaching Brett's crew and designing this house, she stopped hiding. She started building again. Not just structures, but something more. Partnership, she says. 50-50. You handle clients, I handle calculations. We both handle construction oversight. Brett grins, extends his hand. Deal. And they shake on it under the stone arch as the sun sets over the mountains. The elementary school becomes their first official project as Morrison Hartwell Engineering. The old addition is demolished. In its place, they design something revolutionary for Pine Ridge, a hybrid structure that becomes the model for the entire valley's reconstruction. Stone compression arches span the main classroom, exposed, beautiful, teaching children every day about the principles that keep them safe. The stones are different colors: granite, basalt, limestone, each one numbered, part of a permanent exhibit about the convergence of 1998. Between the arches, large windows flood the space with light. The stone provides strength. The glass provides openness. Beauty and safety combined. Brett handles the construction. His crew has grown. The convergence taught the valley that building correctly matters more than building cheaply. People are willing to pay for expertise now. Eleanor designs each arch with precision, calculates load paths, specifies materials, inspects every weld, every mortar joint, every anchor bolt. The school opens in September in time for the new academic year. The dedication ceremony draws the entire town. Mayor Higgins, humbled by the convergence, gives a speech about listening to experts, about the cost of ignoring warnings, about the woman who saved them despite their mockery. Eleanor stands in the back, uncomfortable with the attention. But when the children file into their new classroom and immediately start asking questions about the stone arches, about why they are curved, about how they work, she steps forward. She explains compression stress to third graders using wooden blocks, shows them how an arch distributes weight, lets them feel the strength of stone when force is applied correctly. The children understand. Their questions are sharp, curious, unafraid of physics. One girl, maybe 9 years old, asks, "Did you build these arches because you were scared?" Eleanor kneels down to the girl's eye level. "I built them because I did the math, and the math told me what needed to be done. Fear is just information. You choose what to do with it." The girl nods, satisfied. Eleanor sees Daniel in that moment. Daniel, who taught architecture students that buildings should serve people, not egos, who believed that good design could save lives. She stands, continues the tour. Teaching. By October, Morrison Hartwell Engineering has redesigned 47 structures in Pine Ridge. The valley is transforming. Stone arches appear over barn doors. Parabolic reinforcements support church roofs. The fire station gets a complete rebuild with compression geometry that can support twice the code requirement. Every structure is different. Every design customized to its purpose. But all of them share the same principle: when extreme load comes, compression wins. Brett teaches a night class at the high school, structural engineering for contractors. 20 men and 3 women show up the first night. By the third week, the class has doubled. He brings in Eleanor as guest lecturer. She explains load calculations, safety margins, material properties. The contractors take notes like university students. These are people who have seen their work fail, who have learned humility through catastrophe. One of Brett's old crew members, a carpenter named Tom, stays after class one night. "I've been building for 15 years, Tom says. Never understood why we did things certain ways. Just followed the plans. Now I get it. Now I can see the forces." Brett clasps his shoulder. "That's what Eleanor gave us. The ability to see what's invisible." In November, Brett is invited to speak at Montana Tech. The engineering school wants to hear from the contractor who survived the convergence, who learned from failure, who partnered with this engineer who saved 200 lives. Eleanor goes with him. They present together. Brett talks about the hubris of experience without theory. Eleanor talks about the limits of theory without practical knowledge. Together they walk through the convergence, the failures, the rescue, the rebuilding. The students are riveted. During Q&A, one asks Eleanor, "How did you know they would let you save them after they tried to destroy your work?" Eleanor is quiet for a moment. Then, "I didn't know, but I knew Daniel would have gone. He believed in helping people even when they didn't deserve it, especially when they didn't deserve it. So I went." It is the first time she has spoken publicly about Daniel since the warehouse collapse. Brett, sitting beside her on the panel, reaches over and squeezes her hand briefly. Solidarity, understanding. After the presentation, the department chair offers Eleanor a position. Adjunct professor, teaching structural analysis to undergrads. Good salary, minimal travel. She declines politely. "I'm needed in Pine Ridge. We're not done rebuilding yet." But she agrees to guest lecture twice a semester, to bring real-world failures into the classroom, to teach the next generation that calculations matter, that warnings matter, that pride kills. In December, 1 year after the convergence, the Valley holds a memorial. Not for the dead. There were no deaths, a miracle that still amazes meteorologists who study the event. But for the reminder, old Bob Sullivan speaks, 93 now but steady. He talks about 1912, about losing his sister, about watching his grandfather warn the town and be ignored, about the cost of forgetting. "We forgot," Bob says to the gathered crowd, "forgot that nature doesn't negotiate, forgot that smart people have reasons for their warnings, forgot that being humble keeps you alive." He gestures to the stone shield on the mountain, visible from everywhere in the valley now, a permanent landmark. "That woman up there remembered for us, remembered when we forgot, built when we mocked, saved when we didn't deserve saving." He looks directly at Eleanor in the crowd. "Thank you for being stubborn enough to be right." The crowd applauds, not polite golf clapping, real appreciation, the kind earned through shared trauma and survival. Eleanor nods once, acknowledging. After the memorial, she drives to the Whitefish River, the same spot where she hauled stones for 2.5 years, the place that gave her the materials to build her salvation. She sits on the frozen bank watching water run beneath the ice. Jack Reeves finds her there an hour later. He has become a friend over the year, someone who understood early, who believed the data. "You okay?" he asks, sitting beside Hero. "I'm thinking about Chicago." Jack waits. I thought coming here was running away, Eleanor continues. Thought I was hiding from what I couldn't fix. But maybe I was running toward what I could. You thinking about going back? Eleanor shakes her head. No, but I think it's time I made peace with it. 2 weeks later, Eleanor drives to Chicago. It is the first time she has returned since the day she walked out of Morrison and Associates with a cardboard box of her belongings. She does not visit her old firm, does not tour the city she once called home. She drives directly to Graceland Cemetery on the north side. Daniel's grave is simple. Black granite, his name, his dates, the words she chose 5 years ago. He saw beauty in broken things. She kneels in the frozen grass. I did it, she says quietly. I saved them. 200 people. 0 deaths. A winter wind moves through the cemetery, rustling the bare oak branches overhead. I know you'd be proud. You always believed I could do anything, even when I didn't believe it myself. She places her hand on the cold stone. I'm staying in Montana. I know that's not what you would have expected, but it's where I'm supposed to be, where I can actually make a difference. She sits there for 2 hours, talking to him, telling him about the stone shield, about Brett, about teaching a whole town to build stronger, about the children in the elementary school asking questions about physics, about learning to forgive herself. When she stands to leave, the guilt that has lived in her chest for 5 years feels lighter. Not gone, never gone, but manageable. She drives back to Montana that night, 18 hours straight, arriving at dawn to see the sun hit the stone shield, making it gleam like a crown above the valley. Home. The stone shield becomes more than a structure. It becomes a symbol. By spring of 1999, journalists arrive. National Geographic wants to do a feature. Engineering magazines want technical details. The Discovery Channel films a documentary. Eleanor cooperates reluctantly, gives interviews, shows them the calculations, explains the principles. But she makes one demand: every article, every documentary, every feature must include the names of the 78 people who died in 1912, must tell their stories, must explain that the convergence was not new, just forgotten. This isn't about me being smart, she tells a reporter from the New York Times. This is about a town forgetting its own history, about dismissing warnings because they're inconvenient. That's the real story. The article runs in March. The Woman Who Remembered is the headline. It focuses less on Eleanor's engineering and more on the town's collective amnesia, on old Bob Sullivan's childhood trauma being dismissed as senile rambling, on the cost of arrogance. Pine Ridge reads it with mixed feelings: pride that their valley is national news, shame at seeing their mistakes in print. But the article brings something unexpected: tourism. By summer, people drive up from Missoula, from Bozeman, from as far as Seattle to see the stone shield, to photograph it, to touch the river stones and marvel at what one woman built alone. Eleanor hates it at first. Strangers on her property, questions, requests for selfies. But Brett convinces her to embrace it. This is how we fund the rebuilding. Engineering consulting fees only go so far. But if people want to pay to tour the town that survived, we can use that money. They organize official tours. Old Bob leads them, telling stories about 1912 and 1998, about the warning signs, about the power of listening to experts. The tour ends at the elementary school, where children explain to visitors how compression arches work. The revenue funds scholarships. Eleanor Hartwell's STEM scholarships for Montana students pursuing engineering. 5 full rides per year. The first recipient is Sarah Fletcher's son, Liam, who survived the convergence at age 6 and now at 7 can calculate load-bearing capacity with wooden blocks. By 2000, Morrison Hartwell Engineering employs 12 people: structural engineers, architects, drafters. The little firm in Pine Ridge consults on projects across Montana. Anywhere mountains meet buildings, anywhere snow loads matter, they are called. Eleanor teaches Brett advanced structural analysis. He teaches her practical construction techniques, the wisdom of materials, the art of building efficiently. They design a community center for Pine Ridge, a gathering space with a massive parabolic stone roof that doubles as an emergency shelter. Rated for 120 pounds per square foot, enough to survive 2 convergence events stacked on top of each other. Overkill, Brett asks, reviewing her calculations. Engineering is applied paranoia, Eleanor replies. We build for worst cases because worst cases happen. The community center opens in October 2000. It wins an AIA award for innovative structural design. The jury citation specifically mentions learning from catastrophe and honoring those who warn. At the awards ceremony in Seattle, Eleanor gives a brief acceptance speech. This award belongs to 78 people who died in 1912, she says. To old Bob Sullivan, who remembered when everyone forgot. To Brett Morrison, who had the courage to learn from failure. And to Daniel Hartwell, who taught me that good design serves people first. Her voice doesn't crack, but her eyes shine. Brett stands beside her on stage, the contractor in a rented tux, and he means every word when he says Eleanor Hartwell saved my life twice. Once from a blizzard, once from my own ego. I'm grateful for both. They return to Pine Ridge with the award, display it in the community center. Right next to a photograph of the collapsed gymnasium from the night of the convergence, hydraulic jacks holding up the sagging roof. Under the photo, a plaque, "Excellence is remembering what everyone else forgot." December 2000, 2 years after the convergence. Eleanor stands outside her cabin watching the first snow of winter fall. Gentle flakes, normal snow, light and fluffy, the kind children play in. The stone shield arches above her, eternal, protective. Brett, Jack, and old Bob join her. A tradition now, first snow together. Remembering, Bob speaks quietly. Feels different now. Safer, Eleanor agrees. Because we're ready, Brett adds. Because we learned. Because we listen, Jack says. Eleanor places her hand on one of the river stones, feels its strength beneath the polymer seal, thinks about the journey from Chicago to here, from grief to redemption, from isolation to partnership. She does not say these things aloud, but she thinks them. I couldn't save you, Daniel, but I saved 200 others. I thought this shield was about surviving alone, but it became about teaching others to survive. Grief tried to bury me. Instead, it built me into something stronger, something useful, something that helps. Thank you for believing in me when I couldn't believe in myself. Thank you for teaching me that buildings serve people, that engineering without compassion is just mathematics. I finally understand what you meant. Snow falls gently, caught and deflected by the perfect curve of the parabolic arch. The flakes slide harmlessly away, never touching the ground beneath the shield. Eleanor Hartwell is safe. She is home. She is vindicated. But more than that, she is free. Free from the guilt that chased her from Chicago. Free from the need to prove herself through isolation. Free to build, to teach, to help, to matter. The stone shield stands above her. A monument to preparation, to mathematics, to one woman's refusal to be wrong twice. But it is also something more. A reminder that warnings matter, that expertise matters, that humility keeps you alive, that sometimes the things people mock are the things that save them. Eleanor looks out at the valley below, at the lights of Pine Ridge glowing warm against the winter darkness, at the new roofs, the stronger buildings, the elementary school with its stone arches, at 200 people who are alive because one stubborn engineer did the math and refused to compromise. She smiles, not a big smile, just a small curve of satisfaction. The smile of someone who knows with absolute certainty that physics doesn't lie, that stone and compression is effectively unbreakable, that preparation defeats catastrophe, that she was right, and that being right this time saved everyone. The snow continues to fall, soft, gentle, beautiful, normal snow, the kind that Montana can handle. The kind that the valley is now built to withstand, because they remembered, because they learned, because one woman refused to let them forget.